Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Big Gives webinar about social media for charities, all around the big Christmas campaign. So my name is James Cadford-Pete. I'm here from William Joseph, and we're going to go through a bunch of different content around Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and how everyone can be using social media even more effectively. Both in the Big Give week and throughout the year. So as we know, the Big Give is here to help yourselves raise even more money to fund the fantastic work that you do. This year we're using the slogan of one donation, twice the impact, and we have got even more people involved than we did before. So we've got over 500 charities looking to double that impact from about 300 last year. So it's going to be even bigger, even better, with even more help going to yourselves. Today's session is going to be nice and simple. We've got fairly quick presentation with lots of examples in it, and then we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions for us, just leave some marks in the notes section. I think it says submit any questions on the webinar, or email us at the address here if you've got anything else you would like to ask once we're finished. So just as a reminder, I'm sure you all know, but the campaign starts at midday on Tuesday the 28th of November, which is in 2 weeks' time, and then it closes 1 week later. You'll have your dashboard to log into the resources to help you make the most of the campaign. And in case anyone hasn't seen it before, here's just a little bit of a diagram for how the match funding works with your pledges and donations that are doubled. Obviously, it's important to remember that within that week, that is the period in which your donations are matched by us. So make sure you put as much effort as possible into that time. We're going to go through a little bit as to when we would suggest is best to be raising awareness around social media as we go through the presentation. So I think now we're up and running and everyone can hear us. We will kick off. So social media, there are a fantastic number of channels, all of which are freely accessible for charities around the UK. And we've seen some real success both with the Big Give and with other fundraising campaigns by you making the most of them. We've run some webinars before about sort of marketing in general. It's worth revisiting just a couple of the concepts within that before we go into social media specifically. So when we're talking about marketing, we're quite often looking at this funnel, marketing funnel or fundraising funnel as some would call it, where we're looking to try and speak to lots of people at the top, get them to consider and understand our charity or our cause, and get them to purchase, or in our case, donate to a particular organization. Then once they've done that, we will very often be looking to try and encourage them to repeat that purchase or donation, or take another action to help support the charity. Social media is a fantastic channel for both ends of this funnel, really, because of the reach that we can gain through networks like Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. We can get in front of people who otherwise wouldn't hear about us and the work that you are doing. Then once people have heard about us, we can make sure that they are hearing and made a donation. We can make sure that they understand the impact that that gift has had by presenting them with details of the causes that you support. So these are really interesting channels and really effective channels at both ends of that funnel. We're going to talk about how you can do that over the course of the next 20 minutes. So timings around the campaign. Now, increasingly crowdfunding campaigns are increasingly well understood, as is the Big Give. Whilst it's not exactly the same as all crowdfunding campaigns, it does have a lot of similarities. And one of the main similarities that it has is the speed and the timing of when people will tend to support particular projects such as yourselves. Now, it is obviously only 1 week long, so all of this is quite compressed compared to, say, something on Kickstarter, which might last for weeks and weeks and weeks. But you will see a very quick uptake early on within the week, and then maybe a slower build within the sort of day 3, 4, 5, or 6, and then lots of interest right at the end of the week. So from our perspective, it's well worth looking at the two ends of this timeline for when you want to focus your efforts around social media. Now, you want to make sure you've got lots of content and conversations going on right at the front of that campaign, and really you want to be preparing all of that content far before the campaign kicks off in a couple of weeks' time. We'll talk about how we can do that a little bit later on. And then, whilst you want to be posting and communicating with your audiences throughout that week, really make sure you're saving some of your most effective content for sort of day 5, day 6, just before the campaign closes, so we can have one last push to get you as many match funds as possible. So, content. Now, there's lots of information on the internet about what makes good digital content, and we're going to go through just a couple of frameworks which are well worth considering when looking at social media, and in fact any type of information you're putting across digitally. And the first one is called Hero, Hub, and Hygiene. Now, this was actually created by Google to describe the best way to organize YouTube content. However, it really can be used across all different types of social media. The idea is that you would have an awful lot of hygiene content and slightly less hub content, and that you would save your most effective and most sort of high production valued hero content. You would only be doing 1 or 2 of these, or you'd be doing far less of these than you would the rest. That hero content is particularly disruptive and engaging, and you can see here the examples that they always use are around the Red Bull jump with Felix Baumgartner. The actual event itself, that's the real hero content there. With underneath that, the hub content that they created around that was sort of more behind the scenes footage, still engaging, but much more regularly updated, so it was a lot easier to create. Then finally, they would have kind of more hygiene content, which might be around the explanations of what was happening. It might not even be filmed, it might be an animation or an image. And these would happen much more regularly and be a lot simpler to produce. Now, someone like the NSPCC takes this same approach to their Facebook content. So their hero content might be their recently released sort of TV advert around breaking the silence. And this is really high production values. It's professionally produced, and they might only do 1, 2, or 3 of these every year. But that's particularly disruptive content. Then their hub content is stuff that they will produce themselves rather than more high production values, but it will still feed into what they're trying to achieve with their hero content, which in their instance is around breaking the silence. Then finally, their hygiene content on Facebook itself isn't even a video. It's actually just some imagery that they're posting around the number of phone calls that they get through their Childline service. So all 3 of those pieces of content are trying to achieve the missions of the NSPCC, but they do it in subtly different ways, and this is how you can construct a plan for your social media content that allows you to hit all the needs of your audiences. Another framework that's worth considering just before we kick into the actual channels themselves was created by this gentleman, Elias and Ilmo Lewis, in around the 1910s. And this is called the AIDA framework, and as you can see there, it stands for Attention, Interest, Desire, and Action. And this was created actually to try and get people to think more about their marketing practices in sort of classified listings. But the aim is, as it describes, to get an initial interest and the attention of an audience, then to build the desire for whatever it is that you're trying to sell or communicate, and then make it really easy for them to take an action. Now, even though this was created over 100 years ago, it's still got a lot of impact, a lot of relevance today, and hopefully we'll see through some of the examples that we're going to share how effective it can be as a framework. So let's kick into the actual social channels themselves. First off, we're going to talk about Facebook. Facebook, as everyone will be aware, is the largest social network in the UK. It has something like 60% of the population are active on it. And it's very important not to think of Facebook as a young person's social network. The demographics on Facebook are basically exactly the same as the demographics of the UK population. So your 45-year-old aunt is just as likely to be using it as your 18-year-old millennial teen. So when we are thinking about how we can target people, if your core audiences are a little bit older, they are still going to be on Facebook and engaging with content or even adverts. So it's well worth making sure it's a key part of your marketing and communication strategy. So we're going to look at just a few examples of people who are doing this really well. And if people want to ask questions about this, then again, please do in the notes section, and we'll get to them at the end. If people would like to share their own content that we can discuss, then that would be great as well. But the first example we're going to look at is Special Effect. Special Effect are a relatively young charity who look to help make it possible for children with disabilities to use and play computer games. The reason they do this is actually it's often the only part of their world where they are not seen as different, because if you are able to play FIFA with your friends of the internet, then that might be the best, most sociable, most exciting activity that those children can achieve. And it's been very, very effective, and they've had lots of support from across the gaming industry and with people like Google. And part of the reason that they have been so effective is because they're very, very good at telling the stories and the impact that they have. Here's just a selection of the content that's been through their Facebook page in the last few weeks, and you'll see that none of it is particularly high production values. It's mostly done on handheld cameras, or even in that in that piece in the middle, it's all done taken from camera photos, but it really illustrates the impact that they have. They're very good also creating video and linking out to video, and people that have covered them as a charity. You can see over there on the right, that's linking out to the Financial Times and a piece that they did about their impact. And they have a mixture of that hero hub and hygiene content, but all of it is looking to grab the attention of people that support them and help them understand what it is that they're all about. Secondly is the NHS blood donation service. We'll come back to these guys when we look at Twitter, but Facebook, they are particularly effective, and they have been doing this very, very well for a very long time. The reason that what makes them so effective is that their stories are all about the individual people that blood donation can help and save. Again, here you won't see very many high production photo shoots or video shoots. It will all be about photos that their community and that their audiences have shared with them that help show the impact that giving blood can have. You see here on the bottom right hand side, even their content around Remembrance Day is very low key. It's shot just on a camera and uploaded into their Facebook. And these guys have 400,000 followers on their Facebook page. So it shows that you don't need to have high production values to create really effective content for any of these channels. On the other end of the spectrum, which is worth looking at, even though it's not necessarily available to everyone, is Charity Water. So Charity Water are an often US-based organization. And what they do is they are well known for having quite high marketing standards. So here you'll see their photography across their Facebook channel. Now, this is just really to illustrate the point that you need to mirror your organization's sort of values and brand within your Facebook and social media. So if you are a smaller on-the-ground charity, you want to be making sure that you are looking exactly that way on Facebook. If you are a more high production value-led organization, as Charity Water are, that also comes across. What does sit across all of those production values, though, is that the content which engages people most is that which is focused on individuals. So here you can see that Charity Water are taking nice, expensive photography, but it's still focused on people, exactly the same way that the NHS blood donation are doing, and exactly the same way that Special Effect are. So make sure that your social media across the board, whether on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, is focusing on the people that your organization has an impact with. You can also see here a few examples where organizations have been promoting the Big Give specifically. These are just some nice examples that we picked off from this year, explaining what the campaign is all about to those to your audiences. This is really nice content, and make sure you're combining this with illustration of the stories and the people that you are supporting. One of the other things to talk about on Facebook is video. Now, this has increased hugely over the last 18 months, and probably even since last year's campaign has become even more prominent in terms of its use across Facebook. It is very much down to organizer. It is now the best way to communicate on Facebook. Whilst it might take, unfortunately, it can take more effort and resource to create. It's still doable regardless of your marketing budgets or capabilities. It is worth considering, though, that these are the kinds of content that you are going to be competing against in people's news feeds. So it's well worth. It is worth making the effort, if you can do, to create some quality video content. One group who's been doing this particularly well is the Child Bereavement UK organisation. For anyone that hasn't seen their One More Minute film, it's really worth looking at. It's a masterclass in quality charity video at the moment. They do have a particularly celebrity-led following, it seems, but what they've actually done with it is probably applicable across the board, in that it's individual stories. It's people telling the story to camera about what they would do with One More Minute with their loved ones. Now, the cause itself and the production are very high value. However, the little tools that they've used, everyone can do. And the first that you'll notice across the board is the use of subtitles. This is very important whether you're the New York Times or a smaller charity, because most people are watching video on their phones without sound on. So if you are trying to convey your message, make sure you are using subtitles on your videos. Facebook has a service where it will automatically add subtitles for you, or you can actually add them in the video itself. And secondly, and possibly most importantly, the Child Bereavement UK created lots of different pieces of content from their video. So they had their one piece of hero content up at the top, which they promoted and pushed far and wide, and then they've got these pieces of hub content that sit around that video that allow them to have an increasing impact off one piece of content. So it's much more efficient and effective at getting their message across. We have seen some big give charities as well looking to create their own video, which is fantastic. Here's an example from Cherry Trees. And again, this is nice and easy to create video and really gets the message across, is making sure that people use subtitles and all the rest of it, and is growing the reach of that organization and helping them to reach their targets. So it doesn't have to be the high spec content that some will be able to create. It can be just done at in fact, some of the best work is done at the organization's premises, just on a camera phone. The final thing to talk about with Facebook is Facebook messaging. In case you haven't seen this, although I suspect a lot of people will have, Facebook now allows people to message directly an organization's page, and essentially it gets used as a sort of a supporter service. So you want to be making sure you're looking at this in the same way that you're looking at your info email addresses, or if you're monitoring Twitter, asking for people asking for help or more information. If someone's gone to the trouble of talking to you on Facebook, it probably means they're a really engaged supporter and someone who might be able to help you out with achieving your goals. So make sure you get back to them as quickly as you can do, as Facebook does show people how likely you are to reply to their questions. So that's Facebook. Hopefully just a bit of an idea as to what's working best within that network. Basically, to recap, it's about making sure you've got stories of individual people with the production values that match your organization. Try and experiment with video where possible, and make sure you are replying and engaging with anyone who is talking to your organization. Next up, we're going to talk a bit about Instagram. Now, Instagram is, if Facebook is all things to all people, it allows video, it allows photography, it allows text, all kinds of different pieces of functionality. Instagram is much more specific and is much more about image-led content. So if you're going to be working with Instagram, you need to make sure that you and your organization, or people within your organization, can create really quality visual content. So one of the people that I've worked quite closely with in the past are Spitalfields City Farm here in London. Now, these folks there are not lots of people, they do not have big budgets, but they are creating really fantastic content that fits with their organization exactly perfectly. So they will have lots of imagery of the animals that they look after over in Spitalfields, but they'll also, again, be looking at the people who are engaging with their work and the impact that it can have. They also use opportunities such as Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter or any of these sort of marks in the calendar to push particular messaging, and they've been quite successful in pushing some of their products that they have for sale on the farm through Instagram, just again because it's so visual and it sits in and amongst this other content so well. If you get a chance, do check them out. They're a really good example for on the ground, nice and efficient content that anyone could create. Again, at the other end of the scale, you've got people like Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, who are putting huge amounts of time and resource into really exciting, really sort of content that it feels that you wouldn't see anywhere else within the mainstream media. And again, this isn't necessarily going to be relevant for everyone, but this is the kind of content that you are competing with if you are going to use Instagram. So it's worth understanding what's out there. Again, you can see here, wherever possible, they are focusing on people. It has a feel of Humans of New York, if anyone's seen that Facebook page. But again, it's telling the stories of the people who are benefiting from the work of MSF. We've also got here an example from Farah, who are a network of charity shops that help young people and children. And what they've done very cleverly is they've sort of jumped on a bit of what happens a lot in Instagram, which is all around fashion and clothing. And so these guys will take pictures of the stuff that comes into their charity shops, and they will present them like fashion shoots. And they are not. You can see here that lady is using a camera phone rather than a production shoot, but it really helps to grow the impact and grow the reach of what they do. They use hashtags very effectively, which in the fashion world is really important. So make sure you're jumping on trends where possible and where appropriate. Finally, Kids Charity UK are another nice example of a sort of small organisation who are doing effective things within Instagram. They're telling the stories of the impact that they have, but they're not afraid to sort of mix it up a little bit as well. Here they've got a nice piece of content around donating jokes, which is just made really simply and really efficiently, with which anyone could do. Again, you'll see the nice use of hashtags there on the right, which is particularly important within Instagram if you want to grow the reach of your posts. Finally, it's worth mentioning as well, within Facebook and Instagram, there's a significant opportunity for those that are able to extend the reach of their content through paid adverts. It's very easy to set up. You can test from as little as sort of 10, 15, 20 quid to see what difference it makes and whether it's right for you and the content that you're able to create. If you go to that web address there, which we'll share later on, you can see a whole guide, and it is really designed for people to be able to walk through the process nice and simply. You do not need to be a sort of digital marketing agency expert, media buyer, in order to get quite a lot out of their options and you can extend your reach across both Facebook and Instagram from the same platform. So it's well worth testing for your content around the year and in relation to the big give as well. So finally, Twitter. Twitter is quite different compared to Facebook and Instagram. It's a much more real-time network, so a lot of the content that you will see on Twitter is relating to the news, and rather than being a true broadcast medium like Facebook and Instagram, it tends to mostly be based on the interactions between people, organizations, and quite often the press and celebrities. So we'll just have a quick look at a few organizations that are doing this well. But before we do that, nice information on the internet about the different types of updates that you see on Twitter. And this is obviously true across lots of different pieces of social media, but within Twitter there do tend to be a fairly set format for a lot of the content that is shared that you can see here. And again, we'll share this content after the webinar so that you can get into the detail of that. The other thing that's worth saying about Twitter is that there's a lot of evidence to show that actually, as well as having a high quality in terms of your updates, the frequency and the quantity of updates that you that you create has an impact on the number of followers. So whereas with Facebook and Instagram, you're probably looking to make sure only do 1 or 2 posts per day. With Twitter, basically the more conversations that you can create and engage with, then the more effective you will be, especially throughout that week of the big give. You want to be taking every single opportunity to send a tweet that's possible, that fits in with your organization. Some other interesting research as well is around actually the nature of those posts, and that you want to, the more positive you can be, the more effective you will find Twitter. So obviously for the organizations that we are fortunate to be a part of, this should be nice and easy, again telling the stories of the impact that you're having, but make sure that you are trying to be as positive as possible on Twitter in order to increase your following. Again, we've seen some really great content already this year and a bit from last year on the big give, and this is these have been created by our partners. So have a look and maybe get a bit of inspiration about how you might be able to do the same. Again, lots of resources within your dashboard, things like the logo and everything, to make sure you can make these nice, easy little Twitter cards for the social network. Now, one organization that's been doing a fantastic job on Twitter and has really been punching above its weight is the CEO Sleep Out. So you may or may have not seen these, but this is a campaign that goes around all different parts of the country, recently in Manchester, but also in London and Birmingham, and gets leaders of business to sleep out as if they were a homeless person for a night. And obviously it's a fundraising campaign in order to support those who are without homes. And the reason it's been so effective is because it's really, really people-focused. So every time they have a piece of content through their events, they're able to tag lots of different people in the posts, and who will then retweet it, and who will have other people who will look to retweet it for them. So this, from one post, will start to grow reach really, really effectively. So if you are doing work on Twitter, make sure you are tagging people who are relevant to the post, and this is the kind of work that you want to be doing ahead of the launch of the campaign. Make sure you're speaking to anyone who might have a Twitter following that you can ask for help, any of your volunteers, if you have a CEO or trustees who are from the local area, from the local community. Make sure you're tagging them in your Twitter posts and getting them to extend that reach for you, so that as many people as possible can see your content around the big give and hopefully get involved. Within Twitter, it's also worth considering the other kind of high-value influencers that can be a part of the network. Now, firstly, this is the press, and then normally celebrities. So the press keep a strong eye on Twitter, and this will be from your local groups and also the sort of more national brands. And again, the NHS blood donation service is a fantastic example of what can happen if you're willing to be brave and know your audience and your tone of voice on Twitter. So they posted the image on the left, on the link on the left, asking people from the black community to donate blood, and then they had a number of racist comments about it, which they then responded to in a really strong and forceful way. This then got picked up from across the entire press spectrum, and they actually, in the end, saw the increase in donations that they were looking for many-fold. So that it's obviously, again, not an example that will be relevant for everyone, but it illustrates the kind of work that if you are effective on Twitter can grow your reach exponentially. If you're willing to get involved and get engaged with people, even if they don't necessarily support your cause, it can still work out well for you. On a more local scale, this will be about making sure that you are commenting and having the conversations with those local journalists or local news organizations to try and drive your reach. In the same way as with the press, celebrities and local celebrities can be effective on Twitter. But what you want to be making sure is across this whole spectrum, people who are writing the news, who are in the news, who are influencing and have a wide impact, make sure you are speaking to them before the big give starts. If you are just randomly tagging celebrities or influential people in posts, they will be very, very unlikely to actually sort of retweet and to drive that impact. You want to get them lined up across those 7 days with them knowing when and where you're going to be posting so that they can engage with it in the way that they want to and grow your reach as far as possible. So you want to have that full plan for the whole week so that you can make the most of the opportunities within Twitter and with your supporters. So that's just a quick run through of some of the opportunities across social media, across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hopefully it's given you a few examples that we can look for inspiration. And now we'll just go to the questions within the group and see what people are asking. Bear with us. So we've had a question through on email. Someone's asked, if we were to choose one channel only, which channel do you think we should use? Very hard to say without knowing your organization, but in my experience, Facebook tends to have the most return on investment if you are already established within it. If you are sort of new to all of these channels and are looking to build an impact in a short space of time, I think it's probably Instagram or maybe Twitter where you would be able to get the most return on your investment. We've had another question here. We'll be posting on Instagram, putting the donation link in our bio. But what tips do we have about increasing click-throughs through Instagram? Since you can't put the link in the actual post, it's a good question, and I suspect we already know the answer. Really, it is just about continuing to tell people that the link is in the biography where people can find out more. It's also one of those things that maybe is worth experimenting with paid media if it's possible, as you are able to link directly out of the posts there. Also making sure you're using those hashtags so that people find your biography and your page wherever possible if they're part of the conversation elsewhere. Got a question. We want to work with influencers but don't really know where to start. What do we suggest? We start with the people that you know. So start with, as I said, your trustees, any senior members of staff. Your influencers don't need to have millions and millions of followers. If you've got people who know folks in the local media or in local organizations, then they can be incredibly effective at driving your reach. So speak to those that you know, make sure that people understand the importance of it, and get them to help as much as possible and get them to understand the impact that it can have. We've got a question asking about whether we recommend using LinkedIn. It really depends on the kind of organization you are, as I'm sure you'd expect. LinkedIn can be particularly effective at targeting high net worth individuals. So if you are a very corporate organization, then people like CEO Sleep Out have used LinkedIn really effectively. For a more consumer-led organization, I've rarely seen it to be massively helpful. But again, all of these things are free, so it's well worth exploring. There's a question here about using images of people because of confidentiality. That is a really, really challenging situation one I've been in with myself. For something like Instagram, it's actually amazing how, with such a visual medium, how responsive people are to imagery that doesn't show people's faces but can still tell their story. So it's undoubtedly a harder thing to do, and it may well be worth sort of speaking to a local photographer, even if they might help on a volunteer basis, and setting them the problem. You can use things like stock photography and all the rest of it if you really need to. But if I were you, I'd try and work with a photographer who can sort of represent the story you're trying to tell without showing people's faces. But yeah, it is a challenging situation, and one that maybe you want to explore other channels ahead of social media, because it is really, really focused on people and as a visual storytelling medium, unfortunately. We've got a great question here about measuring the success of our work on social and improving it. Yeah, so anything that you are, any channel that you're using to drive people to your website or somewhere else, you want to be tracking. You want to be tracking the links really effectively. So if you haven't used UTM tracking, make sure you have a look at that. Look that up. That will allow you to see how many people are clicking on all of your links through Google Analytics if you're driving people to your web page. A lot of the channels as well, if you are paying for media, will give you a much more in-depth information about how many people are liking, sharing, clicking, commenting on your posts. So that can be a really good reason, even if just for sort of a £20 test, you can start to get an idea of what sort of interactions you can expect on social media. So yeah, that's how I'd approach it. Got a question here about how to deal with followers who complain about charity fundraising on social media. The organization wants to try and engage, be transparent where possible, and avoid blocking, and that's absolutely the right approach. You definitely want blocking people from social media is a really last response if possible. And I think for me, in the organizations I've worked with in the past, it's just about going back to them again, explaining the impact that you are having and the benefits of your organization wherever possible. Be really mindful that it's in a very public setting, and if possible, quite often it's best to take that conversation into a more private setting, so like an email or a direct message. Sometimes you can, or even a phone call if possible. Sometimes it can be slightly more effective to have that conversation. But even if you do that, be aware that an email is only a screenshot away from being another conversation on Twitter. So certainly don't share anything that you wouldn't be comfortable ending up back on social media. But again, be aware that there are some people whose arguments, that you just won't be able to convince to your way of thinking, and that's okay. Try not to spend too much time worrying about it, and focus on the people who are going to engage with you and your organization. Another question here we've got from an organization that doesn't have an Instagram account but think it would work well. Would the Christmas challenge be a good time to start an account? What happens if we don't use it consistently? Great question. So for me, yeah, absolutely. Today would be a great time to start your Instagram account so you can start building some momentum ahead of the Christmas challenge. As with all of these channels though, whilst it may be free to sign up, in order to do this stuff effectively, you do need to have the buy-in internally to commit a level of resource to it on an ongoing basis. That doesn't mean it has to be forever. You can start it for a couple of months and see what kind of engagement and interaction you're having. but you do need to be updating it fairly consistently to really make the most of it and grow the reach of your organization. So go into it, do get involved, do test it out, but make sure you've got buy-in from across the board that this is something you're going to have to spend time on over the next number of weeks or months. Question here about animated videos. Lots of illustration. The organization has a lot of illustrated images that they could put together to tell people stories. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of organizations, including the big ones such as NSPCC, will be doing exclusively animated videos. It's a really effective way of getting around some of those difficulties of photography within the networks. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend it. And because, as I said, so few people watch videos with sound on, it can be really nice. Also, yeah, don't be afraid to sort of intersplice the animation with photography if you have it as available to you. Question here about how do you contact celebrity social media admins for retweeting or promoting the cause. That's really the same way that you would do in any sort of press or PR conversation. A lot of celebrities will actually have their agents' contact details within their social media biographies, so it's worth having a look at those. But it is quite tricky, and if you don't already have a relationship with that celebrity, it is actually quite a big ask to get them to promote a cause through social media. So try and get that conversation going as early as possible, and try and build a relationship so that celebrity really is bought into what you do. And if possible, get them to meet you in real life, get them to come down to one of your causes, so that they can see it with their own eyes. Engage with them in the same way that you would any influencer through press and PR channels. Got a question about whether we'd recommend auto-sharing tweets to Facebook and vice versa, or is it best to treat them differently? It sort of depends on the content. I would avoid auto-posting, auto-sharing it if possible. But for some of that hygiene content, it can sometimes be okay. The difficulty is for what makes a good tweet in 140, although now it's 280 characters, is quite different to what will make a good Facebook post. With Facebook, you can do so many more interactions and links and hashtags and all the rest of it. So if you can make the effort to write content across both of them, in my experience, it generally is worth it. But it's probably better than doing nothing across either channels, if that's the conversation you're having. And I think that's the end of our questions. Oh, so we've got one final one here from Cara about whether there were any good applications for animation. Cara, I'm afraid I don't know any off the top of my head, but we'll see if anyone else has a suggestion. Maybe they could email us in who've used one that's nice and easy and cheap or free, and we'll have a look and maybe post a link afterwards. So thanks very much for your time, folks. Best of luck with the campaign, and can't wait to see all your fantastic social media content around it. Cheers. Bye-bye.